from the University of Virginia Center for Politics.
Good afternoon and welcome to the University of Virginia Center for Politics Global Perspectives on Democracy Program's Ambassador Series. I'm Damon Irby, Director of Global Initiatives at the Center for Politics. Today we are honored to host this special event with the ambassadors from the Baltic republics of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. His Excellency Kristian Priik, Ambassador of Estonia, His Excellency Maris Selga, Ambassador of Latvia, and Her Excellency Audra Plepytė, Ambassador of Lithuania. We are most grateful that each of them could join us today. We actually began planning an Ambassador Series event with the Baltic republics back in the early fall of 2019 and had a date scheduled in April of 2020. Of course, like most other events during spring of 2020, we canceled with the plans to try again in a few months, once COVID had hopefully faded away. For a gathering such as this, it was our desire to be together in person. Eventually, our vision moved to a fall 2022 event, but the Russian invasion of Ukraine created an entirely new urgency. Many in the global community feared that the Russian military would run over Ukraine and then potentially turn its sights on Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania with the hope of succeeding in Vladimir Putin's vision of a new Russian empire. Today, the Baltic republics are successful westward-focused nations on the cutting edge of technology, not to mention the fact that they are important members of NATO. The ambassadors will share their country's perspectives with you today, but I believe we can safely surmise that they have no interest in a return to Soviet-style domination, as we see happening in neighboring Belarus and what the Russians are attempting to accomplish in Ukraine. The resumes of today's Ambassador Series speakers could easily fill most of our time we have allotted, so I'll focus on the highlights in order to provide the greatest amount of dialogue and allow time for some of our students to ask questions. Prior to being appointed Estonia's ambassador to the US in May of 2021, Ambassador Kristian Priik served in various diplomatic roles in both the US and Estonia. In Washington, he worked at the Estonian embassy as the defense counselor, as well as diplomat covering trade and economic issues. In Tallinn, he worked in various positions within the Foreign Ministry and most recently at the Ministry of Defense as its permanent secretary. He holds a master's degree from the Strategic Studies program of the United States Army War College in Pennsylvania and a bachelor's degree in political science and economics from the University of Tartu in Estonia. Ambassador Maris Selga has served as Latvia's ambassador to the United States since September 2019. He joined the Latvian Foreign Service in 1994 and has since worked in a variety of diplomatic roles, Latvia's ambassador to Egypt and China, and the non-resident ambassador to Jordan and the United Arab Emirates. He has also served as Latvia's observer in the League of the Arab States and the African Union. Ambassador Selga graduated from the Faculty of History and Philosophy at the University of Latvia in 1993. Ambassador Audra Plepytė began her service as Lithuania's ambassador to the United States in April 2021. She began her career in 1994 and has served Lithuania in a variety of diplomatic roles in the US, Lithuania, and other parts of Europe. Since 2010, Plepytė has served as Lithuania's ambassador to Spain, the director of the European Union Department at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the permanent representative of Lithuania to the United Nations in New York, where she was elected as the president of the executive board of UNICEF. She holds degrees in philosophy and international studies from Vilnius University, as well as a diploma in diplomatic studies from Oxford University. We couldn't have a more accomplished panel of diplomats, and we are truly honored to have each of you with us today for this Ambassador Series event. Our moderator is Professor Philip Zelikow, who is the White Burkett Miller Professor of History at the University of Virginia, where he has also served as Dean of the Graduate School and Director of the Miller Center. His scholarly work is focused on critical episodes in American and world history, especially the 20th century. He was a trial and appellate lawyer and then a career diplomat before taking academic positions at Harvard and the University of Virginia. He has served in all levels of American government. His federal service during 5 administrations included positions in the White House, State Department, and the Pentagon. His last full-time government position was as the counselor of the U.S. Department of State, a deputy to Secretary Condoleezza Rice. Professor Zelikow served as the director of the 9/11 Commission and is one of the few individuals to serve on the President's Intelligence Advisory Boards for presidents of both parties in the administrations of George W. Bush and Barack Obama. Professor Zelikow, thank you for moderating today's event, and we look forward to an engaging conversation.
That's great, Damon. Thank you. Well, I think what we'll do is, you've already done a splendid job with the introduction. I think what we should do first is hear from the ambassadors and give each of them just a chance to spend about 5 minutes each providing a little bit of a scene setter and that introduces themselves and a little bit of what's on their mind to our audience. Let me go ahead and start with Ambassador Priik of Estonia, and then we can follow with Ambassador Selga and then Ambassador Plepita.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Philip. And thank you, Mr. Irby. And I'm really grateful for the UVA for giving this opportunity today for us to talk. Now, Estonia, maybe first, in terms of alphabetic order, but Estonia is also the smallest of the Baltic nations and the northernmost of the Baltic nations. I personally prefer to say that Estonia is not that small, but Estonia is just compact. That we have a lot of variety pushed tightly to a very small territory. After all, it's approximately the territory of New Hampshire and Vermont put together, or 1.5 the size of Maryland that we have. Estonia was among those countries that emerged independent after the First World War, just like our southern neighbors, but also northern neighbor Finland. We do share quite a bit with our neighbors Latvia and Lithuania when it comes to current policies and our positions on transatlantic affairs and so on and so forth. But there are also things that are very different. Historically, we've gone through very different periods with our Baltic neighbors, and also when it comes to language and religion, there are differences between the Baltic states. But I will not go deep into that. I'm just trying to convince the listeners that when it comes to the Baltic states, we may be relatively small according to the US standards, but Europe is full of diversity, and we are very different countries, as well as we are all very different from our bordering Russia and Belarus, linguistically, historically, culturally, and so on and so forth. Now, Estonia was an independent country between the 2 world wars, and just like Latvia and Lithuania, we were occupied and annexed by the Soviet Union as part of the pre-Second World War, let's say, machinations between the Nazi Germany and Soviet Union. Unlike Finland, that decided to resist militarily in a very similar circumstances, Estonia decided to just give in to the different ultimata that the Soviet Union posed us, and eventually, as a result of Second World War and the Soviet and Nazi repressions before, during, and after the Second World War, Estonia ended up losing almost 20% of our population in the way of people getting killed, people getting deported to Siberia, or people just fleeing our country to the west. During the Cold War, our country was occupied and annexed by the Soviet Union, but the United States never recognized the occupation and annexation, and this remained the basis for restoring our independence in 1991. So we were considered not a new entity legally according to international law, but it was just a restoration of the independence that was de facto lost in 1940. Now, since then, we've been very strongly pro-American transatlantic nation. From the very early 1990s, we devised as our goal to integrate as tightly as possible to European, trans-European and transatlantic organizations and institutions. We became the member of NATO and the EU in 2004, and have been together with US and her allies in all the different NATO operations. Also participated in coalition willing operations in Iraq, Libya, elsewhere. So. Strongly pro-American transatlantic nation, and certainly also a very strongly pro-business nation. We are frequently excelling in different rankings when it comes to economic freedom, ease to do business, ease of tax system, and so on and so forth. So we tend to think that also in that sense we are probably very close to America when it comes to the philosophy of running economy and personal and the societal wealth. I would stop here right now. I know that there will be most likely questions about security situation right now and war going on in Ukraine. I remain able to and willing to answer to those questions. Thank you.
Ambassador Selga, tell us a little bit about yourself and your country.
Good. I hope that I switched on all microphones. It's a pleasure to be here today, of course, and thank you very much for a very kind invitation. And as Mr. Irby mentioned, of course, I mean that's in making since end of 2019 this event, so that I think finally we are honored to be together with you. Fortunately, well, we wanted to be in Virginia, of course, in the University of Virginia in person, but unfortunately, I think we are still stuck with the Zoom. But thanks also to Professor Zelikov for moderating this event. I think this is excellent time also to discuss relations between the Baltics and the United States. The war in Ukraine has brought a lot of attention to our nations. But before I go into that, I would like, of course, to highlight something positive that gives us a reason to focus on the Baltic-US relationship. I think in many ways I will probably repeat a little bit what my Estonian colleague said, but I think that's very important for us, for Latvia, and also for Baltics in general, so that we do mention those couple of historical facts as well. This year will mark also a very important anniversary, 100 years since establishment of diplomatic relations between our countries and the United States. And of course, it's important to note that US never recognized the occupation of the Baltics, and the relations have continued for over 100 years. So during the occupation, diplomats representing an independent Latvia continued to work in the United States. And after we regained independence, the US was a strong supporter of our efforts to join NATO and also helping in many ways also to join the European Union. And of course, nowadays, our relationship continues to thrive. Latvia, the same as Estonia, is a small country, a little bit bigger than Estonia, but I think I would say that the size of West Virginia. But we, of course, have a lot to offer to the international community. We are proud of our strong democratic institutions. The concept of democracy is also not something new to us. We were a democracy since becoming independent 104 years ago in 1918. And for example, we are very proud to say that in Latvia, women have always had the right to vote since the very first elections. And I have to mention that that happened earlier than in the United States of America. So we are also strong economically. Our IT and technology sector grows each year, and we have one of the best startup sectors in Europe. Meanwhile, of course, our education institutions continue to produce renowned scientists and researchers. Thanks to our democratic institutions, growing economy, and historical experience, Latvia can offer a lot in terms of foreign policy. Importantly, we can also share our experience with the nations seeking to become more democratic. We have been actively doing this with Eastern Partnership countries. In international organizations, we continue to use our experience to further European values and foster positive change. Latvia, following the footsteps of our two neighbors, Lithuania and Estonia, is a candidate to the United Nations Security Council elections in 2025. Where I am sure we will be able to play an influential role by bringing our experience to the powerful international body. Regarding our relationship with the United States, security is always our top priority. The Baltics are fortunate to say that we have had bipartisan support in the United States under all administrations. The United States understands the Baltic security equals security for the entire democratic world. And the war in Ukraine has further shown us how important Baltic security is. Our security is in the interest of the United States and all of NATO countries. While the war is unfortunate, it has opened the eyes of many countries to realize the Baltic countries have been right all along. We never harbored idealistic expectations and warned our partners about Russian aggression for decades. Because of our history and geographic proximity, Baltic countries understand Russia better than anyone. Not only do we understand Russian politics, we also understand Russian mentality. Partners are now realizing that we can provide the best insight and advice on how to approach Russia. As we look back in the past 100 years, I am pleased to say that our relationship with the United States continues to improve and become stronger. While we rely on security guarantees from the United States, we have also strengthened our own military and defense capabilities. The partnership between Latvia and the United States really is a true partnership in the sense of the word. Latvia's experience and expertise in dealing with the United States, especially now, I am hopeful that in the future we will continue to work together to not just further our bilateral relationship, but to learn from each other and collaborate on partners in navigating international challenges. And of course, I'm looking forward to discussing this and as many other issues with you further today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Selga. And Ambassador Plepita, look forward to hearing from you. I understand that you're also a career diplomat, or as I used to be.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. And I also join my colleagues for thanking you for inviting us here and organizing this event. It's really great pleasure. And unfortunately, it's still virtual, but I hope that soon we will be able to host physically as well at your university or one of our embassies as well in DC. That would be great to see you and students there as well. So since my colleagues started from the history and geography and numbers, so I can say that we moved not only alphabetically from Estonia to Lithuania, but also from the smallest to the biggest country, from the north to the south. I didn't expect to speak very much about history, but maybe as well to show that also what is the difference between Latvia and Estonia and Lithuania. So we also have in 20th century gained independence on the 1918, but we had Lithuanian statehood in the Middle Ages. And that it was quite big. It encompassed Belarus, big parts of Ukraine. And so you can, if you travel, I don't know how many people can travel now in Belarus, but in some parts of Ukraine as well, can still find the Lithuanian castles, and our kings and dukes were there. So that's why I'm just going to the nowadays, that sometimes what's happening in our southern neighbors in Belarus or Ukraine for us is also very dear. Despite it, I think it's very dear and important. Somebody has a mic.
Jā, redzēsim, ko izdomās par tiem autobusiem.
Marius, I presume it's yours.
I think it's Karma.
Yeah, that's it. So that's so this, and with the US, we also had long-standing relations. And just maybe some facts, which are not so very well known. I think in New York, one of the first Latin schools was opened by Lithuanian in the 17th century, or our and Polish and Belarus statehood, because Sushka was fighting on the American Independence War. He was fighting for Lithuanian and Polish independence as well in the 19th century, and then moved. So that's all this interconnected and entwined our history has been for centuries. But as I mentioned, the 20th century is the most important thing. So, and here our restoration of modern Lithuania and construction of modern Lithuania, which started in 1918 as Latvian and Estonian, is also basis for our statehood now. So, and here I would like to underline and thank US leadership in non-recognizing our occupation in the 1940s. So that's why I cannot host you here in our embassy, but our embassy is one of the longest functioning, non-interrupted in the same building embassy after the Polish. The second is Lithuania, which we will be celebrating 100 years of functioning in 2024. So, and this U.S. leadership of and U.S. decision not to recognize annexation and to allow our diplomats work in D.C. during the occupation, Soviet occupation of Lithuania, allowing our flags hang in the State Department for us who were behind the Iron Curtain and were in the Soviet, always gave hope that one day we might be free and independent. And fortunately, that date happened. And so that's why we are more than 30 years together now constructing the new international order, participating in all multilateral institutions. And that's why also very much together fighting and supporting the freedom, human rights, democratic principles, wherever they are fought and protected in the world. So, and for this one, I think, as mentioned, my colleagues as well, I think all our Baltic states, including Lithuania, are very, very much transatlantic, pro-US. We see the US as the leading nation who was always fighting for their freedoms and democracy and principles. So, and you have here in us really big allies and partners in doing that. That's why when we see what's happening in our neighborhood, the Russian aggression, the propaganda, and all this oppression and what's happening is really painful for us. We still remember that, and we really cannot stand silently and not doing anything. So that's why it goes without saying that we do very much support the Ukrainian fight for their freedom, and also joining all the international community in supporting them. And here as well, I wanted to mention exceptional US role in forming this partnership, preparing for before the war, how it was raising awareness about what can happen and preparing the whole international community to support Ukraine, to have sanctions against Russia, and to do everything possible that this war would be won. So I don't want to go to the details. I presume we will have lots of questions and about that and more detailed discussions. So, but that maybe that would be that's small introduction from my side. And if we speak about security, which is always US is the key partner for us, and in NATO and in Europe as well, and in our region. But US is also partner, as I mentioned, in promoting democracy, human rights, and of course economics and trade relations. And here I just maybe could say that I'm very happy that lately the US become one of the most important partners in our trade. Lithuania is, for the time being, is number 6 trade partner. But last year, our trade volume increased like 75%, this year already by 40%. And I'm very happy as well that this trade and economic relations increased not because of some commodities or raw materials or others, but really of high-tech industries. And we are producing together some parts of the vaccine, which is due, and life science, biotech, lasers, and there are so many areas where we really do cooperate and work together with the US. Yeah, so thank you once again. I'm more than ready to participate in the discussion.
I have a question for all three of you. In general, Americans are used to thinking about Atlantic security, even the Mediterranean and the Middle East. The Baltic region is not a region that many Americans are very familiar with. I think we're going to get a lot more familiar with it in the next few months. If, as is expected, Finland and Sweden both make moves to join NATO, that's going to really put a spotlight on the role of NATO in the Baltic. Russian leaders have already said that they're going to respond to that by further militarizing the Baltic region, perhaps deploying nuclear weapons into the Baltic region. So there's a possible move by Finland and Sweden, which of course all of you are very, very well aware of. The threats that Russia is making. But the point is that a lot more attention may focus on security and dangers in the Baltic. And I wanted to just give you a chance to, if you wanted to talk a little bit about the possibilities or dangers there, and talk a little bit about how your people back home are thinking about these Russian threats and the possible danger of more militarization or a wider war. You folks have felt like you've been on the firing line for a long time. Now that and I think all three of you probably are very pleased that Finland and Sweden are thinking about this. But there are some trade-offs that come with that, and I'd just like to give all three of you a chance to talk about that a little bit and how folks back home are thinking about it. And this is, I'll just throw that up in the air for any of the three of you to talk about if you'd like to.
I think the reason why American people don't know that much about the Baltics, or have not heard that much about the Baltics, is not only because there is really nice weather almost year long in the Mediterranean, and our climate is much more Nordic, but it's also because of the reason that particularly since our countries, along with Poland, got the real chance to or real perspective to join both NATO and European Union, and certainly after our countries became the members of both of these organizations. The Baltic region has been a region of growth and stability. It's been boring because our countries have done really, really well. There has been a constant move up in terms of different rankings when it comes to economic prosperity, democracy, rule of law, and so on and so forth. So our countries have boring stories in the sense that we've been stable and good places to invest, but no shaking news going on. Now, this situation has certainly changed with the Russian invasion against Ukraine, and of course I cannot speak for Latvians or Lithuanians, but in Estonia certainly there is a lot of attention to what's going on. Great sense of or great outpour of support for Ukrainians and Ukraine, which manifests itself in both support to Ukrainian government and nation in Ukraine, but also in accepting a great number of refugees. In the matter of a couple of weeks, our population has increased more than 2.5% due to the income of refugees, which in the U.S. Context would mean around 8 million people more. Can you imagine that? And still people are mostly thinking of how to support Ukraine rather than being afraid of Russia. And I think the overall sentiment that our people have is that if we stick together, we being the collective West, then we don't have too much to be afraid of Russia. But if we start wavering, if there is doubt in Western unity, if there is any reason for Mr. Putin to think that the Article 5 collective defense commitment is not real or is not enforceable, then we think that it's not just we that have a problem, but it's actually everyone in the West that should be scared of things happening after that. And as far as Russian threats against Finnish and Swedish membership of NATO, most of it has been just empty threats, in the sense that even when they say that we may have to move the nukes to the Baltic Sea region, the truth is that they have the nukes in the exclave of Kaliningrad, bordering Lithuania and Poland, for some years already. They have made these steps already, so it's hard for them to further nuclearize it. They have exercised also in their own exercises how to attack our countries, our capitals with tactical nuclear weapons. So they've done these steps, and probably these steps are part of the game why the Swedes and Finns want to join NATO to start with. Thank you.
May I jump in then with a couple of comments, so that I fully agree what
Please do. And Mr. Ambassador, since you're so close to Finland, I'd be grateful if you'd say, do you agree with the general view that the Finns are probably going to vote for this? Is it?
I guess if it's to me, yeah. and we are the northernmost, then yeah, I wouldn't spend too much time. My answer is yes. We can discuss.
Oh, that's all right, because you have a better political read on Finnish politics than I do. Sorry, go ahead, Ambassador Selga.
No, okay. Just very short. I fully agree what Ambassador Prick said. I mean, and regarding if we speak about Ukraine, I think that our numbers are very close to Estonian one in this case. So it's also about 1.5%, I mean, out of, let's say, our population, so refugees numbers. But I mean, there is a full support for Ukrainian friends, I mean, in all possible aspects. Regarding Finland and Sweden, I think that's only they joining those countries joining NATO. They will definitely strengthen the region in general, and I think that can be only positive development in this case. Regarding those threats, I mean, regarding using nukes, I mean exactly what Christian mentioned. I mean, nukes are in the region. At the same time, we have to also remember that NATO also has nuclear weapons, so that somehow is forgotten. I think that was a French minister who reminded Russia as well that NATO also has nuclear capabilities. So that's just to be reminded. In general, I mean, if we speak about Russian aggression in the region, in this case, so we have to remember that will be aggression towards NATO. It's not just Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. That's actually conflict already with the alliance in general. Thank you.
Ambassador Plepita, did you want to add anything to them, or?
Yes, thank you very much. And the question, I understand, was about the Baltic region security and why it was so quiet. And I actually, one thing what Christian said, no news, good news. That means it was really, how to say, situation is good. But I would challenge a question that the Baltic region security, how to say, was less important than Mediterranean or
less
something,
well
because
known, less important.
Or maybe that's well known, yes, because it's when we look at the Russian map where it has borders with NATO, that is in the Baltic region. To be very frank, if it's Norway very much in the north, and then it was Estonian, Latvian border on the east. It's Russia and Lithuania and Polish border with Kaliningrad region, which is between Poland and Lithuania. And now, since the beginning of this year quite recently, I would also include Belarus border as well as already Russia's border with NATO, because the war in Ukraine and how Russia acted in Belarus and how they managed to have all this military deployed quickly and in Belarus, and then to organize attacks against Ukraine. So Belarus border also became Russia-NATO border. So it's our more and more security challenges in the Baltic Sea. But you also mentioned how we see that, how we perceive. It's also our colleagues that we got used to that. We're used to that. Kaliningrad was already for many years probably the most militarized region in Europe, and they have Iskander missiles and probably nuclear or something like that. So this there, and been working already with our allies, with our partners, US and NATO countries as well. We do have in all our 3 Baltic states NATO-led battalions, and in Lithuania there's German-led with some partners coalition, and Canada in Latvia, and UK in Estonia, so that gives us more assurances on the Article 5 guarantees of NATO. But we are working hard as well with the partners to ensure that this is even strengthened more. And so we're looking for the Madrid summit and their decisions and further decisions. And also we have US military troops in Lithuania on the rotational basis, but for a couple of years already we had rotating battalion in Lithuania, which is also gives additional security guarantees. And not speaking about our armies and preparation, which is really according to all the NATO standards, and we've been those countries who supported Ukraine first of all, and now is providing training and other support together. So we take security very serious, how I can say. And it's not only security, pure military security. For instance, we a number of years already reintroduced conscript army and some additional, but also civil society is very, very serious in how to say, in educating, in participating, in supporting Ukraine, but also preparing themselves. And just a couple of examples, not only in a week, Lithuania, which doesn't have 3 million people, only people for one NGO raised about $10 million, and it's this amount is increasing. So, and everybody opened their houses for their refugees, so we don't need any how to say, or camps or governmental institutions to help refugees because they find location in refugee. So that's it. So that society is working together with the government and partners as well, ensuring the our security.
Let me ask a question for all three of you that looks forward a little bit. All of you have heard of the NATO-Russia Founding Act, which was the deal signed in 1997 in order to show that NATO was going to respect Russian concerns about NATO enlargement. And in that deal, NATO made certain commitments about permanent foreign bases in countries like yours, about not basing nuclear weapons in countries like yours. But in that deal, Russia also made certain promises. And Russia appears to have broken those promises. So meanwhile, there's going to be a big, there are already debates that are underway now in Washington about how in the future NATO is going to have to provide for forward defense now that this situation is more dangerous and we don't want to have to rely on nuclear tripwires. So the question then is whether or not your governments believe the NATO-Russia Founding Act of 1997 is still valid or is now gone because Russia has violated it. And NATO should now reconsider these issues of permanent foreign bases and forward stationing of its defense forces.
The very short answer is that since the NATO-Russia Founding Act also described the conditions for these mutual commitments as dependent on the current and foreseeable security environment. What was the wording used in the NATO-Russia Founding Act? And certainly what we are seeing right now in the European security environment was not something that was foreseeable, and what these persons signing this document had in mind. So we have a very clear understanding or view that this document is obsolete, and NATO should easily declare that. And in a way, Russia has pulled back from almost any contact with NATO since late last fall anyway. Having said that, we, for example, see very clearly that there may be also unilateral commitments from NATO that NATO can declare. For example, I'm not saying that this is exactly the commitment that NATO should say, but for example, NATO would use the same commitment on 3 no's on nukes unilaterally, without making these deployments contingent on Russian approval, because after all, Russia is the side that has seriously deteriorated the European security environment. So NATO's moves since 2014 and 2015 have been as a response to NATO to Russian actions. So that's the way we see it. The document, we don't consider it valid anymore, but NATO certainly should only do things that are necessary for NATO's own security, for the deterrence and defense on the NATO's territory.
So from Latvian part, I think I can only agree what my Estonian colleague said, so that I think there is nothing more probably to add in this case.
Is there anything you wish to add, Ambassador Plepita?
Just to reiterate that Russia violated not only the NATO Russia Founding Act, but I think many international conventions and agreements as well, starting with Geneva Conventions and everything. And just to ensure, yes, that NATO now has to be really to take the decisions how best to defend, as President Biden said, every inch of his territory as well, what we need for that and to implement that. So without, how to say, not being bound by the NATO Russia Founding Act, which was violated, as you mentioned yourself, by Russia.
Another question for you is, one of the great values of having ambassadors is that each of you are really a bridge to your people back home. One thing that I don't understand very well is I don't understand the domestic politics inside your countries as well as I should. I don't read your newspapers every day. I don't know what people are talking about. If you could, for us over here in Virginia, talk to us a little bit about how your domestic politics is reacting to this invasion. Is this dividing people? Is it uniting people? What's this? Just give us some sense for the spectrum of opinion and the way this issue is playing out in your domestic politics.
If you don't mind, I can start now, not to be the third always. I think I already started a little bit, or we mentioned as well when we spoke how people support Ukraine, and the war in Ukraine and Russian aggression against Ukraine is #1 news in Lithuania for months already, since the very beginning, the day one of the war, but I would say even before that, when we saw the build-up of Russian military on the Ukrainian borders and in Belarus. And what I can say that is really very much recalls us our experience in the late 1980s and 1990s, when Lithuania was fighting for independence from the Soviet Union as well. So it's the second time when I see the whole Lithuanian population so much united on this. There is no any disagreement among political parties or any movements or on TV or anything. And everybody is more united looking how to support Ukraine. As I mentioned, the people making fundraising, and they fundraising now $30 million or even more, donating any goods what they have, or sleeping bags, clothes, food. There was also footages how huge lines of cars were shipped to Ukraine because the people donated their own cars, or even bought new cars, SUVs, and then other people were painting in the colors of the camouflage colors and sending to Ukraine. And accepting refugees. Now it's about 2% of Lithuanian population are refugees, Ukrainian refugees. And they, from the day one, when they receive humanitarian status, they have a right to work, and all children, there's majority of women with children, about 40% of them are children. All of them got places at schools as well, they can attend. It's good that we still have some Russian-speaking schools, but some go to Russian-speaking schools, some even to Lithuanians. There are programs in Ukrainian language already introduced together, all in the shops or the administration. There is all information in Ukrainian, many trying to speak Ukrainian, so it's very different from Lithuania or from Russian language, but that is. So that is really the unity of that. And another unit as well, how to counter Russian propaganda, which we also see coming from the Russia as well. So that's all other initiatives coming from the civil society, not only government, how to do that. And so that is big, how to say, again, movement, societal movement, how to help and to counter that. Not speaking about the full support for the government's actions to raise, for instance, our defense budget. Now was decision to raise it to 2.5%, and for the next years would be 3% most probably. And all the allocations to defense or refugees, that also goes without saying, that is fully supported.
Were Lithuanians surprised back home at how hard the Ukrainians fought, or by the Russian performance? I mean, your country has had its own experiences, including in the violent crises of 1990 and 1991, which I remember because I was working in the White House back then with Condi Rice on these issues. And I'm curious as to whether, again, the back home people were surprised by the way things developed in Ukraine.
Yes and no, I think, because we had with Ukraine and military cooperation and different cooperation, economic cooperation, many people already for years. So we knew about status of Ukrainian military and how good fighters they are and how they are really keen for the freedom for the country, and that invasion 2014 really strengthened Ukraine as a nation and as a country. So that is one. But yes, we are very, very happy about the Ukrainian performances, and that gave us as well more courage as well to support and to cheer. So I think it's now, somebody is joking that almost every Lithuanian became the military expert in that as well. So knowing which best armors they needed, and tanks and everything. It's such, I think that unfortunately we don't have so much as to give. Otherwise, I think would be especially from the people. But yes, that's also reminds us, and very happy about Russians' bad performance as well. So it showed that it's the performance. But I think we cannot also be very, how to say,
complacent
about that. Yes, it's might be false compliance. That is, right. And they are not well performed, but we have to be prepared anyways on our best. So we cannot be. Yeah.
Mr. Ambassador Selga, about the domestic politics in your country on this issue. About the same as Ambassador Plepita described in Lithuania, or would you say the situation is different in Latvia?
Well, it's in many ways very similar, but I think I can imagine the reason why Audra started first, because they are more. I mean, they don't have a quite large Russian minority in Lithuania, so that's the difference between us and also, of course, our northern neighbors as well. I think I can fully subscribe what Audra said, I mean, regarding support, I mean, also from society in general. But of course, there are, taking into account that we have around 23-25% Russians, who doesn't mean of course, that those are, all supporting Putin or his policies, but there are parts in Latvia which were normally, in early days, fed just by Russian news outlets. So now they are closed. I mean, unfortunately for them, but I could say that yes, there are parts of our society which probably would support Putin or would actually support his ideas, actually why this war started. So, but But in general, I would probably say that even, because I do understand it's not that in Russia it's not allowed to speak about war. You have to speak about special military operations, so that which is not, of course, this propaganda doesn't work in Latvia. I don't think that they support war, but maybe they are somehow quite supportive for let's say ideas regarding greater Russia or so whatever it could be behind that. So that's so in general I think there is a full support for Ukrainian army. I think we have given, as my defense minister a couple of weeks ago in United States said that it's 1/3 of Latvian defense budget has been given to Ukraine almost immediately. I can only agree, that our countries are quite similar. I can agree that it's a 2.5%, of defense budget. That will be the same case in Latvia. So that's one thing which I probably would add regarding which Alder cannot do, and I guess also Christian cannot do. I will add regarding the Russian army performance. I had that experience to serve in Soviet army for 2 years, so that was 85, 87. So I know very well how stealing and corruption works in that part of let's say Russian or Soviet at that time society. So that I don't think that there has been so many changes. So that it's when I was serving in Uzbekistan in Tashkent, and officers were building their houses, and they were stealing, the marble plates from the metro stations in Tashkent. So that it works perfectly. So that I don't think that there are a lot of changes in that part. So regarding Ukrainians in Latvia, I think we are in similar position, regarding all the laws adopted in order to make their life in Latvia easier, regarding education, regarding health service, regarding work permits, and of course regarding also languages. And I would say that there are many Ukrainians who are learning Latvian, even probably knowing that they will not stay or hoping that they will not stay long in our country. So that that's a little bit completely different attitude from those from the eastern neighbors. So which more direct in our case, so that you can live in Latvia for 50, 60 years and not learn Latvian language at all.
That was a good story from the experience of a former Red Army man. And I was remembering a joke that I gather is going around in Ukraine, explaining why the Russian vehicles all have the Z symbol. And the joke is that, yes, the other half of the swastika was stolen in the warehouse. So, Ambassador Prick, did you have anything to add to that? And I have one more question, and then I'm going to turn the floor over to students to throw some questions at you.
Okay, just very quickly on the domestic political landscape, 3 changes or 3 developments. Firstly, incredible sense of unity and sense of support to Ukraine and to Ukrainian cause. Just like my colleagues mentioned, different money donation drives, grassroots initiatives to donate 4x4 cars to Ukrainian military, to donate ambulance cars full of medicines and so on and so forth. So lots of that going on top of welcoming the Ukrainian refugees at homes, at different villages, so on and so forth. Secondly, the government has taken a very clear position on Russian energy carriers and gas and oil. We have decided very similarly to our southern neighbors, we have decided to divest from or get rid of Russian gas as quickly as possible, and taking extreme steps to hopefully transform to LNG even this fall. And we are leading in Europe the drive to actually take a very firm commitment to strip either get rid of Russian gas and oil, or at least strip Russians of the revenues for this gas and oil, because this is funding the war. And third, very important development is related to defense spending, and this is also very similar to Latvia, Lithuania. We have been among these countries that have met or exceeded the NATO agreed level of defense spending as of gross domestic product. We have our government has taken now several extraordinary decisions to go well above and beyond of this 2% level, and we are going to also be at the 3% level of spending because of what's going on. On the Russian military, yes and no. My military intelligence colleagues tell me that they are in some aspects surprised by how poorly the Russians are actually using the capabilities and equipment that they know they have, and they know that they have used in exercises, and why they are using so poorly or so wrongly, even in this real life situation. But on the other hand, I would only second to what Maris also said. The Russian and previously Soviet military has always been cumbersome, slow, ugly, dripping oil. The equipment being under maintenance and so on and so forth. So not effective fighting force. However, and this is very important, they just have so much of it, and at this point they have not mobilized from reserves. They have not taken also the equipment out of the reserves. They were hoping to conduct this operation as a swift, nimble, precise, modern warfare, so that no one would argue too much about that in the West. But they would just show the muscle, and then they can go back to usual business, so to say. Well, they were mistaken badly. They mostly underestimated the Ukrainians and the Ukrainian will to fight, from president down to the infantry guy, and actually the grandma who yelled at in Russian, I would add, yelled at the Russian soldier to go home, or if the soldier were to stay in Ukraine, then have the seeds of sunflowers in the pocket, so that the grave would have at least sunflowers growing out of that. Okay.
I tell you what, let me stop there. I think I'd like to leave some time for some of the students to ask their questions. So let me hand this back and see if there are some students who are primed to ask some questions to our guests. I see a hand up from Grant Blumberg. Grant, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you all for joining us today. My question is for any or all of you. Since the beginning of the Russian invasion, we've seen lots of EU countries increase their military spending, and we've also seen increased levels of military cooperation between EU countries. So I'm wondering how your governments view the possibility of the EU growing into a military alliance in the future.
Is there anyone that you would like to hear first?
I guess we can start with Ambassador Selga.
Oh no, I think that Christian is our defense expert. I mean, so it's I would probably say very short and very direct, so that we do consider NATO as the most important, let's say, tool regarding security issues for at least for Latvia, and I guess the same goes for Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. If EU, of course, could add something, I mean, from the military part, I think that would be always, welcome. But we are not looking, let's say, to create, let's say, another EU army, because there is only one army, so that you cannot create the same army. You can't do it in Latvia, definitely, but you can't do even in France, so that not to be, armed forces for NATO and armed forces for European Union. So I think if there is a complementary part, that's I mean, if you can, support, that's one thing. But I think I would say that NATO is the most important alliance. I mean, security arrangement for Latvia. But I know that Christian has served. I mean, has done his part in the Ministry of Defense. He knows probably everything and all the numbers and everything else by heart.
No, I would only ask that, or I would agree with what Maris just said, that as long as US is willing and able, politically and militarily, be involved in transatlantic security and defense affairs, as long as this is the case, we won't see European Union developing the kind of capabilities that would have the ambition of replacing NATO. And there won't be any, as far as Estonia is concerned, we don't see any plausible way of doing it, nor any reason to do it. However, if for some reason US decides to completely pull out of Europe, and that would most likely mean both not just military but also kind of political detachment or disengagement from Europe. However, that would happen, then certainly Europe has to invent something, but according to any realistic projections of existing Russian capabilities, for example, and European capabilities, that would not really be a match in terms of future capabilities, particularly when we consider that Russian all-out effort would mean massive reserve forces and reserve equipment being used rather than just the permanent readiness troops.
Maybe a small comment from my side as well, and I hope that pessimistic, Christians mentioning that US might withdraw from Europe will not happen, especially what's happening now in Ukraine, and when we see the Russian narrative, how they see this war in Ukraine, and that it's a war against NATO or against US as well. So I think it's only strengthened. But what we can also see that NATO is not only US. It's US's presence is crucial and very important, but also by increasing our defense budgets and spendings. We also, all the European and other allies partners has to increase their spendings and and to be more active and more participant. So, and that's why we can we are very happy to see that, for instance, or Germany, which is the leading nation of our NATO battalion in Lithuania, increase they presence military, or Norway and some other countries. And if we speak about support to Ukraine, so we could see that some historic movements as well, how a neutral country like Sweden or Finland supported Ukraine, and many military support comes to Ukraine, not only from the NATO countries, but also from the EU countries, which are not members of the NATO. And that's also important. And we can see now that we started this discussion and the first question about Sweden and Finland joining NATO. So we can see that really this war got some tectonic changes in Europe and in the world as well, which would be very valid for the future.
I would just like to clarify, I did not predict US disengaging from Europe, but I was just referring to this as the very hypothetical scenario where the European countries should have to rethink completely the security.
So are there any other student questions?
Yes. Hi.
Stacey?
Hi, my name is Stacey Bassetti. I'm majoring in foreign affairs, and I believe Latvia has already answered this question. So this question is particularly for Estonia. How do the ethnic Russian populations factor into the decades-long hostilities your country has had with Putin's Russia?
Yeah, thank you. Among Estonian population, approximately 23-24% of the population is Russian speaking. Now, I'd like to make it very clear that whereas these people consider Russian as their first language, they are not completely homogeneous group of people, as very often actually Putin's Russia wants to portray them. Or I would even say that Putin's Russia would really love to claim them all, and possibly me too, because I was, after all, born behind the Iron Curtain when the Soviet Union was still there, and some of the most extreme views of so-called Russian world ideology want to claim all these people who had anything to do with Soviet Union or Russia back then. Now, so among this 23-24% of population, there are also people who actually trace their identity back to even Soviet Central Asian countries, or Belarus, or Ukraine, or some other countries and region. But certainly, for years we've had actually issues how to integrate these people as swiftly and as I would say as smoothly and as respectfully as possible to Estonian society and wider European societies. I think that our membership in the European Union has been a great motivator for also the Russian speakers to be better integrated into Estonian society and to wider European society, because after all, what we have witnessed quite often is that among them the people who may actually really respect and like really the current Russian leadership even, but at the same time they prefer to live in European Union. They prefer to live, study, work, and have holidays in the territory of European Union, because with the rational mind they understand very clearly that this is simply better for them and for the kids. Now, during the war, nowadays 2 months of war, we've also witnessed that actually the media consumption of Russian speakers has started to change quite swiftly, meaning that probably even for those who until the start of the war still considered the Russian media channels as something that were closer to their taste, that the amount of and the intensity of fake news or lies is just too much, and they've been switching more to either Estonian channels or international channels for getting their news. And I really hope that this is irreversible trend that will help to further sort of align our views with our Estonian Russian-speaking community.
Hi, my name is Harper, and I have a question for all of the ambassadors. It's my understanding that in the years leading up to the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact and the outbreak of World War II, that the Baltic countries were not always united in their foreign policies. My question to you all is, how important is Baltic unity in combating the threat of Russian aggression in 2022? And are there any new efforts your respective countries are undertaking to this end?
Should I start maybe? So I can, as historian, I can tell a little bit, because unity of Baltic states before the Second World War was probably because due to Lithuanian case, but historically, and Auder of course knows much better. So that was not so much probably Lithuania, but Lithuania and Poland in this case. And if you remember, then historically, I mean, the Baltic states were supposed to be including not only 3 Baltics, but also including at least Finland, if not even Poland. So that it has been, you know, idea generally, but it didn't happen at that time. I think that it's not only 2022. I mean, unity of the Baltic states. So I think we are very well united because we are part of the European Union, part of the NATO, and those policies are common, I mean, for all of us in this case, and we are part of those, you know, 27 or 30 countries who are working and producing and also implementing those policies regarding security, regarding, let's say, hard and soft security for both organizations. But I think we have been very united and very active, you know, all 3 Baltics from the very beginning of, since we regained independence in 90s. So we still have a Baltic Defense Academy in Tartu, so that it's still functioning and I think doing very well. But we have had Baldev call in this case, so we have had Baltron, we have had many different, I think, military units altogether, so the cooperation, so that in order to show that, and that I think has helped us also within NATO in this case, that we can cooperate and we are compatible. I mean, so and many of our defense policies, and Christian of course can add something regarding that one. I mean, even today, so that it goes hand in hand. And if you look at the support what we have at the US Congress, so-called Baltic Security Initiative, I mean, the financial part which is allocated to the Baltics actually goes to common Baltic projects. It's not just a project for Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. So that's, let's say, air defense, or that's a coastal defense, but those are the financial support which is allocated for all 3 countries in order to, you know, to increase our security capabilities.
Yeah, I guess the further integration in national defense and moving from just let's say joint training of officers and joint exercises to joint long-term capability developments when really significant military capabilities are concerned, this is one of the most recent steps. But our countries are also very closely coordinating each other's positions in NATO and in the European Union. We are certainly working together when it comes to, for example, the sanctions policy right now vis-à-vis Russia. We are closely coordinating the issue of future of energy transition, whether we're talking about the new Green Deal or the, let's say, green transformation, or also about the need to rush out of any Russian energy, for example. So this, there are many areas of cooperation, and I guess our case before the Second World War is actually also a clear example why it makes sense to be a member of the alliance. And as I said in the beginning, that this membership of the military alliance and membership of the European Union has brought to our region the predictability and stability that is good for our people, but is also good for international community, for investors, for tourists, whoever. So that's why it's very different from the 1930s.
That's a great set of answers. I think we're closing in on the witching hour for the presentation this afternoon. So I think this is a good chance to sort of wrap things up. And first of all, I want to thank the three ambassadors for being willing to get together at this very busy time in Washington and devote their time to helping us understand the situation better, understand the attitudes of your people, and educate some of the folks here at the university. I'm also grateful to Vice Provost Stephen Moll, who was once upon a time the American ambassador to Lithuania, and who is now at our university and who played a crucial role in helping to arrange this event and make this possible. I hope you'll all of you will let your folks know that there are a lot of people out here in America who are indeed following these issues closely. And we're really glad we had a chance to share some knowledge from you today.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much for having us.
Thank you very much for giving this opportunity, and I'm looking forward to actually also taking a trip down to Virginia and meeting you and your colleagues in person.
Well, you all are most welcome. I also want to recognize our partners today, the Office of Global Affairs, the Center for Russian, East European, and Eurasian Studies, and the European Studies Program. We're most thankful for them. And yes, we would love to see you again soon here in person. And also thanks to our students. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your semester. And I hope we will all be together one day before too long in person. So have a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.